Things are pushing higher. That's all you need to know.
That's all you need to know. All right, John Tucker, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Alex Steele, Paul Sweeney, live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio in New York City, streaming live. It is starting to snow here in New York, so how about that? It seems like the velocity of news coming out of the Trump camp is really starting to pick up, and it's moving markets. And this is just prepping us for a couple of weeks' time when he is sworn in again as president. Let's check in with Nathan Dean, policy analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence down in Washington, D.C. Nathan, again, the velocity of news coming out of the Trump camp seems to be picking up speed here. Tariffs, no tariffs, how aggressive are they going to be on tariffs? What's the thinking down in D.C.? Because we're getting some conflicting statements and reporting.
Yeah, so President Trump has always been very much pro-tariff, and, he's called for tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and other, members of the international community. But then there was this article by the Washington Post this morning that came out and said that there were advisors looking at potentially scaling some of that back, leading to President-elect Trump to put out on Truth Social that that's certainly not the case. But we take this to be the opening salvo of the soap opera portion of the Trump administration, because remember, there is a pro-tariff wing to the administration. There's also going to be an anti-tariff, pro-Wall Street wing to the tariff argument. And I think this is just the conflicting nature of those tariff argument, of this idea that, pro-tariff popular with the American people, but also the American people don't want high prices for certain goods. So I think the way it's going to work out is you're going to see an executive order, or maybe a couple executive orders on Inauguration Day or the day after, saying that he's going to institute these tariffs, but then you're going to get into the nitty-gritty of the process of it. And I think that it's going to take some time, maybe a month or 2, 3 months for those tariffs to actually come out. Because at the end of the day, just remember, it is President Trump's decision on what these tariffs can do. And the president has a lot of authority to do it. So I think you're just going to continue to see this debate. But President Trump will make a decision, and probably within the first or second quarter of this year.
So is this going to be, the life we lead for 4 years? Like, we get a news area kind of breaking some news, and then President-elect Trump comes out and then refutes it? Because in theory, we could argue he wants to keep optionality, right? And he wants to figure out how to do it. So it's going to be hard for us to really pin it down until he actually says the words.
Yeah, exactly. Optionality is the perfect word for this. And you can say that for pretty much all Washington, because Washington doesn't make a decision on anything unless they're backed into political back corners and they're forced to make a decision. And presidents generally don't want to have their handcuffs, their hands tied when it comes to tariffs, because they are the ones that want to negotiate. Remember, President Trump is a transactional president. He wants to negotiate on this. But what we can say is, for things like tariffs, President Trump has more power. For things like reconciliation bills or tax cuts, that's going to have to go through Congress. There's going to be a process for that. And so you're not going to get the same level of optionality. You're just going to have a very slow moving train moving eventually to its conclusion. So I think for the next 4 years, yes, you're going to have to keep in mind that there's going to be lots of changing of minds, lots of discussions, if you will, and so forth like that. But eventually there is a process for everything in Washington, and that should give you some clues of how things are going to actually play out.
Nathan, as we get closer and closer, well, actually, the Congress has been seated this week, and we've get closer and closer to the inauguration. Is there any kind of growing consensus about how helpful this Congress will be to President-elect Trump in terms of enacting some of his policies?
Yeah, so right now we're in the optimism stage of the Congress at the moment. And certainly, if you're on the Republican side, look, they're very optimistic. There's lots of talks about getting things done, but ultimately, this is very much a challenging year for the Republicans because they only have a very slim majority in the House. And when President Trump, let's just take, for example, over the weekend, President Trump said that he wants to do one reconciliation bill, one bill that would do tax cuts, border security, defense, raise the debt ceiling, and all that. He can get every single Republican to do that, great. But if he only loses 3 or 4, that entire message, that entire effort is derailed, and they want it done by April. That's probably too quick. But if you decide that you can't get it done, nothing says that you can't just break it up into 2 bills, do one in the first half of the year, one towards the end of the half of the year. That goes back to the optionality argument that Alex was just talking about here. So what we would say is that very much the Republicans are aligned on a lot of things, but the nitty-gritty is going to be extremely difficult, especially when it comes to tax cuts, because you're going to have to figure out how to pay the $4 to $4.5 trillion worth of tax extensions. And when you can only afford to lose 3 or 4 members in the House of Representatives, that's a very tall task to do. So again, Washington is going to take lots of time. There's nothing really here saying you have to get things done until things like the debt ceiling come true, or you have a government shutdown or anything like that. Kick the can is the easiest thing for Washington to do.
And we saw all of this sort of play out with the speaker vote on Friday, and just showing like that very razor thin margin. Just to end on this, it is January 6th. This is when Congress is certifying the results of the election. Can we just look at how today is different than 4 years ago? The obvious, yes, but in terms of security in place, rules in place.
Yeah, so there was obviously a lot of changes that happened after January 6th. For example, there was a fair voting rights. They made it much more difficult for people to overturn, or at least seek to overturn, to challenge the election results, especially in the Senate. Here in Washington, we have a snowstorm, so obviously that's keeping a lot of people away from the Capitol and so forth. And, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries has already said that he is going to instruct the Democrats to certify the election. So we're not going to see any of the political issues that we saw 4 years ago. Certainly a difference in time, a difference in agendas. And, time will tell as we see maybe 4 years from now if that continues.
All right, very good. Nathan, thanks so much. We appreciate that. Nathan Dean, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Policy Analyst here. In just moments, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau